Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Maithili and Elona, two senior leaders in technology, certified life coaches, and life coaches for women in data. In this episode, we cover lots of ground, discuss perfectionism, my personal favorite, imposter syndrome, and how to get unstuck in your career. So grab out a pen and paper because there are tons of nuggets of good information in this episode, and it's definitely one that you're going to be able to listen to over and over again. Maithili, Elona, welcome to the Data Bites podcast. I'm so happy to be having a conversation with you because many of the members in Women in Data have had the opportunity to have a conversation with you as life coaches. And I feel like I don't get to have enough conversations. So, what I'm excited for that, but what I'm excited to have this opportunity to share more of your story and dive into the benefits of life coaching and just the wisdom that both of you share in your coaching sessions. So, thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's just start by having each of you share a little bit about your story, having both being someone who work in tech, but also are certified life coaches. I feel like it's a great combination to have. So would love to know how this unfolded for each of you. So Elona, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I guess I never anticipated becoming a life coach. I can tell you, I started out as a civil engineer, and then I moved to software engineering, and then software engineering management. And so probably nowhere in that path do you think next stop life coach, but I burned out in a big way and had to take 6 months off, or did take 6 months off, which was a great benefit from work. And about through that, exactly the 3 month part, because of, this is how perfectionists act, I think, I started freaking out a little bit about going back. Because if I went back, I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to burn out again. This has been great, but that will be miserable. What do I do? And my lifeline was finding a coach. And then out of that, I it was just so good. And it was so much the missing thing. Like we always see at work, we have these like women's groups and they'll talk about topics, and it feels like kind of like a group that gets together and commiserates, but then what are the actual solutions to move you forward? And the life coaching piece was the actual solution to move forward. And so that's why I decided to train as a coach. So that's kind of in a snippet my story. Maithili, do you want to pick up from that?
Yeah, I'll just pick up where you left. So actually, Elona is my coach for everyone who is listening. She's been my coach who helped me come through burnout myself. And as you can see with us, one of the common things we had was, apart from being the diversity in tech, we were also sort of in this sort of phase in our lives where, we take on a lot of responsibilities at work, at home. Juggling them is hard. um, but I think like one of the areas where I was starting to see myself, there was a point where I was reaching where I needed help. And really, you understand that there's something you need help in when you're in burnout, but you're unable to articulate and understand exactly what is needed to come out of it. um, and I really think it was a lot of stuck, or beliefs I had held for a long time. One of them was that, around work life balance, that it's going to be hard to achieve. You got to work super hard during the week, and then the weekend is where you try to get somewhat of a balance. Operated under that belief for a long time in my life, until I met Elona and started working on understanding that actually that belief was not serving me anymore. And sometimes it starts with some of those limited beliefs that you've held for a long time, and a coach coming along and helping you say, hey, like, do you think this is like, helping you let's look at things from a perspective. Starts there. You have the awareness, but and then it starts to reprogram your beliefs in a way that are serving you for who you want to be, who you want to become. And I think that's the journey. But it's and then through this process, I got so edged with the possibilities. I started to seeing so many possibilities as I came out of burnout. that I thought, wow, this work can help so many more people. And, I really found a passion in that, and then sort of went into life coaching myself to certify. And there I am. It's all about like giving back to the community and, and continuing to be on that path yourself. So that's a little bit about my story.
So I find it interesting that what got both of you into getting coaching yourself and then seeing the power of it, becoming coaches, was burnout, right? Which is something that seems very much being talked about after we come out of the pandemic, and particularly for women. Maithili, you mentioned this, right? You're usually balancing not only a lot of things at work, but take on a lot of that unpaid labor at home as well, whether we should or shouldn't somehow. Maybe it's a belief system that we have to let go of there. But what are the reasons you see people coming into life coaching for? I know both of you kind of came in for the burnout, but is are there common reasons people come into this space, and how do you know if you even need life coaching to begin with?
Well,
Alona,
I
do you want to?
think mightily you said it. It's like the one clue is that you feel stuck and you just like I don't know where to go. The other piece is sometimes you just get into this space of it's kind of like an echo chamber in your head and it's not helping you, to move forward. You can keep thinking the same things or looking at things in the same way and sometimes it's good to just talk to somebody else and see if there's another perspective that can open up. So if you feel like that, like especially if you're in a space of a lot of rumination about like a job search for example, that could be a good time. What do you think, Miley?
Yeah, I think that word stuck is really, you know, the the place that you feel, and we've all been there, and continue to sometimes find ourselves in our sort of thought patterns, so as to say, we continue to sort of have those thought patterns which seem like we are aware. Sometimes even the awareness is there, but it's sort of, what do I do with that? How do I go from here? And I think that's where I think the coach comes in, and those manifest in terms of, sometimes it's our fear. Like, a lot of times it's just fear of failing. And you start to dig a little bit into that stuck, like why am I stuck in? Where is that coming from? It comes to your, self-worth, and it can come to, being very hard on yourself, which happens a lot with, we see with burnout people. They're very hard. Or you feel sometimes, you're victim of a circumstance. You feel you're not empowered or don't have that agency to change, and the situation feels like it's too overpowering for you to figure out, how do I get out of that situation? And that's kind of where the coaching piece really, because the coach is going to help you look at that from different angles. So I think that stuck to unstuck piece happens with the situation, happens with circumstances that you find yourself in, which can happen at work or life. Yeah.
I think we
Yeah, I
can all
think
very much. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I think a lot of the people we see too are often we see people who are career transitioning and we've both been in technology for a long time, so we probably remember the time that the data scientist role didn't exist. You couldn't go to school, you couldn't get trained for it. And I even remember when like my very reputable university had no computer science degree when I was getting my civil engineering degree. And so if you look over the longevity of these disciplines, like they are kind of recent, professions to go on the books, so to speak. And so a lot of people are career switchers in them. A lot of people are self-trained in them. And so often if you come into it recently and you might think, oh, I'm changing my career, I see a lot of people who come into coaching, they tell me all the reasons why they can't be successful to do the thing they want to do. And one of the things we sometimes do is look at all the reasons why they actually are going to be successful, because they discount, like, they'll tell me like, well, I'm career changing. I have a PhD. And I'm like, wait, what? You know, that comes out later. Like,
Yeah.
I have all these credentials, I have these qualifications, I have all this ability, and it really doesn't matter what your degree or whatever it is. It matters how you approach problems and solve things. And so often we try to like kind of shift that internal narrative away from the all the reasons why it won't work to looking and not discarding that evidence for why it's actually going to work.
So this, I think, brings up an important topic, which is career transitions, and particularly in tech. And you highlighted this just in the fact that there's always new tech innovations and advancements coming out that end up then creating whole new job families. I feel like every month I hear a new job where it's like data thrown in front of it, like data product manager or data journalist. Like now it's like the new thing is just put data in front of any previous existing job and you have like a new job title. And so this is something in tech that as you mature in it, you get used to kind of these transitions. But for a lot of new people breaking into this field, there can be a lot of struggles in terms of feeling accepted or feeling a sense of belonging or knowing if you're going to make it. What do you see being the best way to deal with these transitions, particularly in a technical role?
Yeah, I think this is exactly kind of where we find ourselves in with our careers and our lives. And I want to tell a little bit of story here. Whenever we are in this transitional phase of, I'm maybe transitioning into a new role, or I'm increasing my scope, or to your point, I'm actually changing complete disciplines, or I'm taking time off from to take care of my kids, and now I'm coming re-entering the workforce. These are all like very valid transitions. And the fun part of it is like we've actually have a lot of practice with transitions, but we kind of forget it, in the sense of the what we did to get through the transitions, and it often required a little bit rethinking, coming in with taking a bet on ourselves, overcoming some of the sort of looking outside the situation, and bringing clarity to what we want to learn and grow through this phase. So I often used to ask Elona, and she used to tell me, "Show me evidence. What evidence do you have that you cannot do this?" And I used to do and say, like I say, I'm very lazy, and she's like, "I don't think you're lazy. Like, show me evidence." And I'm like, and it's so true, because when you start to sort of look at that, so the tech piece is a little bit, I think, has that aspect of, there is definitely the piece that we have to learn something new. But if you look at, like, we are absolutely always learning, so the evidence is there that you can learn. Now it's about, sometimes in the transitioning phase, you're often wanting to reach that destination or goal, but it's also important to kind of build that practice and mindset while you're going through it, to have a little bit of fun, like take that challenge along versus knowing that you're going to reach there. But that's kind of where coaching helps, because once we reach the goal, we're like, okay, this is done. Now what's next? So I think like the practice is in between, and that's what life is. Life is happening in between. So that's where coaching helps, but and with the right tools, and there are tools that help you in the transition. So, Elona.
Yeah, well, I was just like building on what you were saying. I was just thinking about also the thing that can feel like a real struggle and maybe a little bit of an existential crisis sometimes is like the what do I want? And I think often we see this sometimes with women in technology at work, even where, they're kind of like fed this line of here's all the things you're supposed to do, here's all the things you're supposed to want. And they might have been told this like growing up, going through school. And going through school there, it's pretty good to set you on a path to tell you what's next, what's next, what's next. And then you get to work and like, what is it? You know? Or you get later in your career and you're like, no, what is it really? I thought it was this, but it's not. And that's another good space to come into coaching and just open up that question of the exploration of what you personally, as an individual, living this one unique life that is yours to live for you, want for that life. And even that structuring of thinking that what you want is supposed to be informed by all these people around you, or like I sometimes have that conversation with people of like, okay, so 50% of your life is for you and the other 50% is for, say your parents. And when you give them the math, they're like, oh, wait, maybe that doesn't make sense, but why do I feel like it's still true? So the exploration of what do you want and the discovery path of it, that's another important thing I think that coaching helps to open up and takes the fear away of exploring that, because you have someone there who's kind of like a safe partner who's not judging you to help you figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, I love this idea of exploration. I also love the idea of like providing evidence. I think maybe coaching and data science should go on in hand, right? We want show me the data that this exists or how this
Mhm.
exists. And then just the idea of like being in the journey. But I know for me personally, like being on the journey for reaching my goal, sometimes the things that come up are struggling with perfectionism, right? And when you're trying to achieve your goal, you can make mistakes. You should probably be making mistakes. And how do you accept yourself like in that process as you are and really deal with those perfectionistic tendencies so that you can really enjoy that journey that you were talking mightily about a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to like, what do you make those mistakes mean? If those mistakes are evidence of your lack of worth, then they're devastating if they occur. If the mistakes are just evidence that you discovered some new information and now you're learning and incorporating, like we all did. If you think back at your 5-year-old self and how good they were with algebra, most of us weren't. It was a series of mistakes along the way in math to get to algebra and beyond. Things you will do at work or things you will try are just the same. So opening it up, and that's the whole point of that mindset book by Dr. Carol Dweck about the growth mindset. If you're in the fixed mindset, whatever happens, like your abilities are fixed, and whatever happens just judges you as good or bad. If you're in the growth mindset, you welcome the learning that mistakes, failures, whatever bring you, because they are on your path to where you're trying to go, and they are necessary steps.
Yeah. And I think this is a great one that we all sort of, especially being in careers like tech, we are used to sort of taking up goals. We're, used to keeping a high bar. Quality matters. So, these are all amazing things we pick up as part of our work and, incorporate them in our life. But like, as Elona pointed out, I really want to reiterate, when you take that to your self-worth and you say, okay, if I didn't do this, or this is how it's supposed to be, only then. And I think like that's the piece where it gets starts to really take you like sort of in the direction of, it's a little bit of concerning for your own health, and so I think like the big part that we all know that actually the only way is progress over perfection. So lots of, amazing stuff that you can do in terms of, I had like, I'll give you a really funny story. Like one of the things I used to struggle with perfection was my inbox. And I used to be like, gotta get to all the red emails and, like really be on top of my inbox. And it was a really funny incident. And Ilona just asked me once, like, what if you just marked everything read? And what if you just put everything in an archive? And what if you thought if this was just like, and I was like, yeah, what if this was just a search toolbox? Like it wasn't more than an inbox. Like, and that perfectionism really held you, but from, and ultimately it doesn't matter. Like, and then you just have to rethink your ideas. Really, with perfectionism also, you got to rethink what perfectionism means for you and what failure means for you. And there's a lot that can open up as you start to do that work in life. And it's fun actually when you start to do that and you start to see the results. It's a practice.
I'm just loving this idea of an inbox being a search. I'm like, okay, yeah, definitely going and marking all mine as red archive. I'm doing that immediately after this conversation. I think that's
Uh,
fantastic.
We literally work on the inbox search features in my team. So it literally is a search. And if it goes down, we have incidents. The other thing to think about email though is like emails coming from other humans. And so if you were so like consumed with people pleasing or worrying about what other people think of you, your inbox can be a really dangerous place mentally because you think it's a reflection of like all the other humans are thinking things about me, which, again, unless they've told you, it's really only your brain
Yeah.
projecting stuff outwards. So that's why it is kind of powerful to just delete everything and see what really happens. And what
Yeah.
actually generally happens is nobody says a word.
Bringing the data science, just for us who are geeks on data, it's really experimentation with yourself and your ideas when it comes to perfectionism also, like as you start to get unstuck, because some of these are small wonderful experiments you can run, and then you see actually it didn't make any difference and really nobody cared. Honestly, if they cared about reaching you, they'll reach out to you anyways. So that email is really not the thing. And you really connection that Alona made between people pleasing, and we all suffer from that a little bit. So that perfectionism actually helps you as you start to work through it. It actually makes you really much more brings a lot more agency back, and starts to recorrect those patterns of people pleasing a little bit, which can really help you shine as a leader. Like that's kind of what happened with me. I think I became a better leader as I started to do some of that work. Yeah.
The other thing we hear a lot about in tech is imposter syndrome, right? So I can't help but think is our perfectionism leading us to imposter syndrome, or is just this something that when you sign up to work in tech, you're also signing up for imposter syndrome badge along with it? What is it that's going on with imposter syndrome and working in tech? How do we get to this point today?
It's a big topic. Um, so a few things I've learned along the way about imposter syndrome. It doesn't just show up in tech, it shows up in humans. And it doesn't just show up in women, it shows up in all genders. I think there's potentially a link. So perfectionism, there's kind of like research on positive perfectionism, and that is makes me want to do this thing better, have higher quality, and so that's good. But there's a negative perfectionism of always striving, striving, striving for this ideal and then never letting yourself get there. Because if you reach the ideal, you're going to like feel good. And so you get the degree or you get the job or you get the whatever the goal is, and you get there and you're like, oh, I still don't feel good. So then you move that, goal out into the future. And I think the way for me, I think it links up to imposter syndrome is the imposter syndrome is an inaccurate representation of what you think is really required. And therefore, it's similar to the perfectionist ideal of what is really required. And so in both cases, I would just this is easy to say, but this is where the work is to do it, is just to discard and decide, no, you're not an imposter. You have the job, good. You're not an imposter. That's the check. And then the perfectionism, don't do the perfect thing. Like do the next thing. Use your good judgment. That's what you're basically paid for, is to constantly accrue the next step on the path, which sometimes is the mistake step, but that's part of the steps to get there. So I think that's kind of the link for me. I don't know, Maithili, what would you say about it?
I think that resonates with me a lot. One thought that I always have with imposter syndrome is with that transition piece that we spoke about. Because as we sort of, are trying to get, first we are trying to, let's say if I'm in a situation where I am trying to get a new job. So I'm in a transition, and now I have doubt. That's the I doubt whether I'm going to be able to get that job. Are my skills right, etc. Then you go through all of that and you have all the evidence that you could do it and you get the job. Now you have the job. Now you have the doubt that whether I'm going to be good at it. whether I'm going to get, validated from work for doing it. Can I become an expert? How do I show up when I'm in the learning phase? And then you sort of kind of get to that piece. And now you get like a promotion. And now suddenly your scope changes. And now you're like, how do I scale? And can I do that next thing? So if you really look at that transition piece and the imposter, it like Elona said, it happens with every human. It happens, it's a very natural thing. But the biggest thing we do with life coaching, we say, doubt the doubt, not you. Don't doubt yourself. And that's the work. Like, you can doubt the doubt. You can say, okay, there is doubt, but the only way, and like she said, only way to get through the self-doubt is actually to do that thing that you doubt, because that's the only way you can prove it wrong. So again, it kind of ties in that data science piece to it as well. So you got to try it, prove the data, and keep going through that. So I would say, like, nothing wrong with imposter, but it's like, do you want to indulge in it, or do you want to like do something about it? And that's kind of where life coaching can help you accelerate not being in that stuck phase and move through that transition, help you accelerate and see how you can get through it.
I was thinking about this analogy. I think maybe we use this in coaching too, when we were talking about like, what do you want to pack in your lunch every day? And so imagine like you have this 10, 20-year career, and every day you pack, I don't know, whatever your main meal is something you really hate, but you pack it along every day and you eat it. And for me, some of these beliefs are like, I keep packing my lunch with stuff that I hate, but I think it's got to be there and I have to eat it. And we're like, hey, you get to pack your own lunch. Don't put that stuff in the lunchbox, or, you know, like put the thing you like in there. And that alone would just, it kind of like sloughs off a big burden that this pressure that these beliefs, these like, I am the imposter, don't pack that in your lunch today. Just even try for a week, try an experiment. Just don't pack I'm an imposter in your lunch for a week and see if you feel better or worse. And if you got fired or not. My guarantee is you probably feel better and not going to get fired. Yeah.
Because I love this idea of all the experimentation and then even bring evidence. I mean, I think about
Yeah.
how we say, oh, we're imposter. Okay, what evidence do you have of that? I mean, rarely have I ever heard anyone being told they're an imposter, right?
But we're
So,
so willing to pick it up and believe it, We're so willing to say, oh, yeah, that's totally true. And you're like, what's the evidence? And then they start
mhm.
telling you about all the degrees and all the capabilities and all the skills and everything. You're like, I'm still waiting for the evidence that you are, you know, committing some type of fraud here.
Yes, well, I think these are all great tips in terms of bringing evidence and getting curious and exploring. And I know just having this conversation with the two of you has given me inspiration and little tidbits to get unstuck in areas in my own life. So thank you. But before we wrap up today, having been someone who has worked in tech for number of years, I'm curious if there was one piece of advice that you could give to your younger self, whether 10, 15, 20 years ago, what would that piece of advice be? So I'll let either of you go first, whatever comes to mind.
Okay, the thing I would give as my advice didn't exist when I started my career, so I can give myself some slack for not knowing about it. It's really that mindset book. When our particular new CEO took over the company a few years back, we all got that book on our desks. And I kind of discounted it, but I swear I've read that thing 6 or 7 times or audibled it that many times, and it's where it's at. So, mindset, read it, and then that's a good path.
And just for our audience, who's the author of that book? The title is just called
Yeah,
Mindset, correct?
mindset, and then there's a subtitle that I don't remember, but it's Dr. Carol Dweck, and I think she's at Stanford, maybe. I don't remember her discipline. Psychology, maybe.
Really, it's there's so many things I'm open to telling my younger self, but the biggest one is, I would say, I it's it's a very simple one, but I wish I could tell her more to be, practice more compassion with one own self, not with others, but with yourself. And since I've unlocked that idea in my life, I think that's the journey, because we're so hard on ourselves, and we need to be on our own team, so really be on your own team, be like the number one player on your own team. And like, I think, like, it's in all the ways that, so I think, yeah, that's sort of what I would tell her more. And I'm glad for all the, ways in which I was not on my team to learn that lesson. But I, having learned it, having gone through burnout and learned that piece, I think it's worth it to stick to it. So I'm sticking to that one.
I love it. Well, both amazing pieces of advice. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up today. So I just want to say a big thank you for taking the time to come on the show, and would like to say thank you for all the coaching that you've done in women in data. I encourage people, if you're ready to get unstuck, it's time to get some coaching, and really excited to have this conversation and share with the rest of our audience. So, Maithili, Elona, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
And a big thank you to all of our listeners. Remember to stay curious and keep learning, and we will catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's conversation on the Data Bites podcast, we welcome you to continue the conversation and join our global community by becoming a member at womenindata.org.